I literally to this day do not know if I've been like more relieved or like more like, I don't want to say happy, but just like at peace than at that moment. Beginning in 2018, I quit my corporate engineering job that I had had for 5 years and didn't really have a plan, but I quit because I needed to do pretty much anything else. And over the next few years, I worked for a gym, drove for Uber, kind of just like random stuff, and ultimately built a real estate business where I own $15 million worth of investment properties, and I make enough revenue from that business to be able to live the lifestyle that I want. And over this video, I'm kind of going to go through my story and what exactly I went through to make the decision to sort of like take that risk and take that leap, right? And how, I don't know, you should consider doing the same if you are serious about wanting to build something great and figure out something with your life. So when I left that job, for all intents and purposes, I guess I had like kind of made it. I was in my mid-20s, making early six figures. I had a wife and still have a wife, but we could kind of do whatever we wanted. Like honestly, on like an average person sort of view, like we made good money. We didn't have to worry about going out to restaurants, things like that. We weren't like, balling by any means, but things were comfortable. And when I left, we lost 80% of our income. My wife had a much simpler job, and it was a tough decision to make, right? Because we went from really being able to live relatively luxuriously to having to cut coupons and count every single penny just to make sure that we weren't going to be, getting ourselves into a hole. But we recognized that, I would say, just like the misery that I was in that engineering career was not going to be sustainable over the entire time of my life and also our relationship. And so making the leap just kind of seemed like something that I had to do. Okay. To get into the real estate realm like I did, that wasn't really something that I ever expected. So, going back to early on, I didn't really come from like a real estate family or anything. My parents bought the house that I grew up in before I was born. They still live there. And I learned about real estate after I left, mostly because it wasn't every business book and wealth building book that I was reading while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was born in the 90s. And so growing up, the sort of expectation was to go to college, get a college degree, get a high paying job, just like it was with so many millennials. And, I didn't really subscribe to that. I guess I never really wanted to, but that's what I did because that's what the expectations were. Like when I was in high school, I think a lot of people that were, the same sort of age group that people are in like their late 20s to, early 40s now, if you didn't go to college, like you were kind of a loser, right? Like going to something like the trades wasn't even considered. Like I literally remember a kid in my high school getting made fun of because his dad was a plumber. And in hindsight, that's such an insane thing to honestly think about. And all of us would just go to college because that's what we were told to do. And, this is where kind of like the old joke came around of like, go to college and get your pointless, liberal arts degree or, music degree or whatever, because that's what we thought we were supposed to do, right? And what we were told, if you go to college, you'll get a good job and you'll kind of figure your life out, right? And that having any sort of degree was really the most important thing. Of course, now in 2024, we all realize a lot of BS, and now we have all these people with student loan debt and everything else, but that's what the expectations were when we were coming up in that period of time, right? And so I went through high school, got good grades. I got accepted into a decent school right away. I actually like an early admission thing, and I accepted that mostly because I was too lazy and I didn't really care about applying to other schools. Like I said, I didn't even really want to go to college, but I chose to go to this school just because they accepted me early on, and it meant that it was going to be an easy second semester of my senior year, an easy summer. And so I went that route. And then when I got to college, I didn't really know what I wanted to study. It was 2009, and the economy was obviously just coming out of the 2008 recession. There wasn't great job prospects in general. And so I went to go get an engineering degree, mostly because I went to this career fair that was like, beginning of my freshman year. Why I went to a career fair as a freshman, I don't know. I just felt like that was what you were supposed to do. And, there wasn't very many companies. I think there was like 12 companies because no one was hiring, but all the companies that were hiring were looking for engineers, specifically for electrical engineers. And so I decided, cool, that's what I'm going to get my degree in, because really all I cared about was getting through school so that I could finally live my life, make money, and figure out what I really wanted to do, which is what had been sold to us the entire time that I was in high school. Right. And so I went through school, got this degree. I never really was into all the classwork or what the other engineering kids were into at all. I didn't like the engineering process. I didn't like anything about what I was learning. But again, it just goes back to once I got that job, I quote unquote knew it was going to be different, even though I didn't realize that, of course, it was going to be different, I guess, but worse. And so barely got through college. I was on academic probation for 6 out of the 8 semesters that I was there. Mostly because of my grades. And this wasn't even because I was like partying or doing anything fun. I didn't really enjoy the college experience in general. I mean, I made good friends and stuff there, but the way that people did college, it wasn't really a thing for me. So I kind of struggled through school, and honestly, I would waste time like, I don't know, going to the gym, like just doing random stuff, screwing around, playing video games, like listening to podcasts when I started getting into podcasts way back then, watching like documentaries, just wanted to learn about stuff that was actually interesting to me. And the engineering work, which did require a lot of study, came after the fact. And so I struggled through school. And then when I finally graduated, I had to take some summer classes to graduate on time. But the great thing was, because of when I got out, 2013, honestly, I was pretty lucky, is it was so freaking easy to get a job. The economy had turned around. Everyone was getting jobs left and right. We weren't making like tons of money. My first job that I got was at a consulting company. I remember was making 56 grand a year, which at the time was like pretty freaking good. Now it's like not a lot with inflation and everything else. But I went from graduating to going right into a job less than a month after I graduated. And I moved out to Seattle, and by all intents and purposes, I was like, cool, this is it. This is my thing. And, got an apartment, started living life. And the first company I worked at was like fine. It had lots of younger people there. The problem was that being a consulting company, there was a ton of expectations around long hours and kind of like this big corporate culture. So after about a year and a half of that, I decided to change. And that's when I got a job at Boeing, which was I would say almost like a dream job for like a lot of people, mostly because it was like the place where you made a ton of money. You had great job security, and you had a ton of room to grow, and they had amazing benefits and all that sort of stuff, all the corporate things that people look for. And I'll always remember walking into that corporate office for the first time, that Boeing office. I worked in the wing facility, and I was like walking through like all the factory and all this sort of stuff, and it was super cool. And then I get up to where my office is going to be, and it's literally like walking into an office space, like from the movie Office Space, like really bright fluorescent lights, and it's just cubicle after cubicle after cubicle for as far as the eye can see, and it was dead silent. And as I made my way to my desk, I realized that I had made a really, really huge mistake. So started at Boeing there. Didn't really like it from day one, but I was in it for the long haul. Like going there, I had gotten a pretty massive pay raise. So at that point, I was making in the mid 90s. So I'd literally gone from my first raise at my previous job, it got me to like 62, and then I got a raise to like 95 plus bonus when I went to Boeing. And so I had a ton of money, which was great. At this point I was like 25, but I hated every single day. And like literally I would go to work and I would just zone out, and I would have these projects and stuff that I had to do. But because Boeing was such a joke of a place to work, honestly, it was like you didn't have to do anything, and they would give you these projects that you had like 6 months to complete, but realistically you could do them in like a day. And so I would just screw around, right? That's when I started getting into entrepreneurship a little bit and started listening to podcasts around building business and stuff like that. And they were very strict about you being in the office during your regular shift. So I always had to be pretty careful doing stuff. But I started playing around with different businesses, and I started getting into the FIRE movement, the financial independence, retire early movement, getting obsessed with this idea of like saving money and investing in stocks and sort of squirreling stuff aside. And so my wife and I, we got really used to living frugally and putting away a lot of money, which ultimately gave me the freedom to be able to take the big risk and leave my corporate job, because I did have a nest egg that I'd saved up when I decided to do that, which is a few years after this whole situation started. But literally I spent every single day at the age of 25, 26, just like needing to do anything else because I was so miserable. And then ultimately, what really, I would say, committed me to like needing to make a change. My dad had a catastrophic stroke, and it was while he was on vacation with my mom, and he spent, I think it was 5-6 weeks living like in the ICU of a hospital, basically being given like a 5% chance to live. And it happened very suddenly, as those things do. And I flew to where the stroke had happened in the hospital he was in. And me and my mom, we spent a month and a half like living in this hospital. One of us was there all the time. We were like sleeping in the lobby, sleeping in his room in like these terrible cots that they would give you where you wouldn't sleep because you'd be so afraid that he was going to like die in the middle of the night. And that whole time that I was going through that, I just got calls from Boeing over and over and over again, just basically wondering where I was and like why I wasn't, there, and threatening me with, basically, I don't know, punishment and getting in trouble, whatever an employer can do. If I didn't get back, fire me, I guess. But I didn't even care. But they were just relentless with it. Even though my boss had approved me being gone, he was actually great. I did have a great boss at Boeing for how much I didn't like working there. But he, had approved it, but the company just didn't care. They just kept hounding me for it. And after that, I entered a really, really bad, I would say like a spiral of depression where honestly, the entirety of that year, which would have been 2016 at that point, and that's also the year I got married. I don't even know what I did. Like I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened in that entire year. I was honestly just completely disconnected from my entire life. And if I look back, I don't know, I guess maybe I have some fuzzy memories with a few things. I remember a little bit of my wedding, but besides that, I lost the entire year 2016 because of depression the depression that I fell into from this family situation I was dealing with, as well as my my just misery being at Boeing. And so carried on with that for a little bit like I did. And then, the 2016 was like that. Ultimately, I ended up getting a different job after that, moving to a public utility, which was actually like a more enjoyable place to work. Honestly, the people were a lot friendlier. There was kind of just like more going on being a smaller company. And I didn't mind working there like at all. And honestly, that was the big eye opener for me, was that place was an okay place to work. I just hated what I was doing. And so I needed to do something different. And I always remember the moment that I decided that I needed to do something else and I needed to quit was like I was driving to work, and it was one of those days where, I was driving and like I was 3/4 of the way to work. I didn't even have any music on, and like I was just in such a bad spot that I had zoned out and not even recognized that it was dead quiet in the car. And I don't even know what compelled me to do it, but I picked up the phone and I called my wife and I said, I think I need to quit my job. And she said, well, what are you going to do? And I had no idea. I said, I don't know. And she just responded like, well, are you going to be happier? And I said, I think so. And she said, okay, cool. Well, you do what you got to do. And so I went and I quit my job that day. And, I literally had no plan. I had like a full 2 weeks notice to, collect like my final paycheck and do everything else there. Everyone thought that I was crazy. Like I literally remember the same thing happened when I left Boeing too. When I left the last job I had, several people were like, you don't leave, like what do you mean you leave? Like, you'll be back. No, nobody leaves this job. Like, this is like the job that you get in this town. Right. And I remember hearing that pretty much every job that I had at Boeing, and then at the last job I had, and looking at those people and just thinking like, man, this is what defeat looks like. This is a person that has legitimately given up on their life and has nothing else going for them, that they feel like they need to put up with this to live their entire life here. And so, yeah, I walked away and left, and I had no idea what I was going to do. And, the weirdest thing is, even though I had so much insecurity around like what I was doing and kind of like what my future was going to look like, the first day that I woke up and I didn't have to go into this career that I hated, I literally to this day do not know if I've been like more relieved or like more like, I don't want to say happy, but just like at peace than at that moment, because I recognized that I had like escaped from the thing that I really, really hated. And, going through all that, honestly, the hardest conversation was with my parents, of all people. Like, especially growing up as the millennial in the 90s, the expectation was always that I would go to college, and my parents had a lot of pride in the fact that I was this Boeing engineer. I was like this established engineer. I was doing these things. I guess for me to throw that away was really, really challenging. I guess for me to tell them that, I always remember calling them on the phone, and like I was literally just sweating bullets. I was so nervous about it. I was very lucky. They're very supportive, but I know it was hard, and honestly, it took years. Like my business was very, very successful that I'd started. Like honestly, this is like in the last year or two where I would say they fully acknowledged that I had like figured myself out. But for a while it was tough, and like even like the little things, like my mom would be like, so what do I like tell people that you're doing now? Right. And I know I didn't really have a good answer for a while because I was just trying to figure out anything. And so anyway, so yeah, I left the engineering career, and literally for most of 2018, and again, a big reason I was able to do this was I did have some good money that I'd saved up. So, over those 5 years I'd been working as an engineer, I saved a lot of money. So I had like $100,000 in my 401k. I had a really large savings account that I had built up. I owned a house that gave me financial security there, and fully understand that that's not what a lot of people are able to do. But that was the cards that I was dealt. I was given that opportunity, and I chose to capitalize on it. And so, when I looked at everything, we basically crunched down our finances to be able to live off of my wife's income, which was like $4,000 a month, whereas I was making like over $100,000 a month before that. So we really had to dial it back. But we knew that if we figured out that lean lifestyle, plus the savings we had, is like we could go for a really, really long time, even if my wife got laid up and we couldn't figure out anything. We weren't going out to restaurants. We weren't like going on vacation. We weren't doing anything too crazy, but we kind of knew the zone that we were in, and we were committed to that. And because I had that financial buffer, I was able to sort of take the leap. So I spent most of 2018 working in a gym, driving for Uber, like doing odd jobs for people on Facebook, and just trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to do next. At first, I thought it was going to be like startups, so I taught myself how to code and really focused on like building out these like tech skills, mostly because I wanted to be able to work remotely. I'm really happy that I didn't do that now, especially after all these tech companies have imploded. But it was something that I pursued very heavily for a while, and I did have like another job for quote unquote job for a startup, which was kind of like a contract thing that I did after I taught myself some basic coding skills. But ultimately, I ended up getting into real estate because it was in every single wealth and business book that I read over and over and over again. Okay, this was this recurring theme around wealth generation through real estate, having passive income, and how that could change your life. And I decided that's what I wanted to pursue. And so, obviously, I recognized I needed money to do this. And so the first thing I did, and it's funny, in hindsight, this is kind of foolish. I think I mostly did this, honestly, because it was like a middle finger to the corporate career that I'd left that I hated. But I cashed out my 401k. I paid all the taxes that were due on that, and as well as like the penalty for withdrawing early. But I didn't care because I had that money in the bank, and I decided to use that as my initial seed fund to start getting into flipping houses. Ultimately, my goal was to buy rental properties, but I knew that I needed more capital to do that. And so I started flipping houses. I had this little bit of extra money. And then what I did at the start is I had started going to these meetups, and I connected with this other couple, these other investors, and they had basically more money, and they had, I would say, like a little bit more experience than me. I had a heck of a lot of time because I was working in a gym and trying to figure myself out. And so we decided to flip houses, and the arrangement was they would bring the money and I would bring the hustle. Okay. And I would basically figure out how to flip these things. And, I had no experience doing anything like this. Like literally when we started, we would buy a lot of the houses that we'd flip. There were what you call REOs, which you don't really hear a lot about anymore because you don't see them a whole ton. But there are these bank-owned properties that banks had foreclosed on, and they were basically looking to sell them, and you'd be able to buy them from agents kind of off the market. And so we would buy these houses. They were usually in pretty bad shape, and the partners would fund it. And my wife and I would literally show up to these houses on during the week. They would have had like all the flooring delivered, and we were like watching YouTube videos about how to install flooring, right? And we just did the basic stuff. Like when it came to things like doing plumbing or electric, or the things that are like honestly kind of like hard for a house, we would have professionals do all those. But the cosmetic things, painting, trim, flooring, swapping out like hardware, like door hardware, all that sort of stuff, that was all us. And I literally had never used a power tool before, done anything on a house until that moment. And we started, my wife and I started putting these things all together. And so, lots of hard lessons learned. The first house that we flipped, it took us 4 months, and our share of the profits was $3,500. And so if you look at like the cost per hour, it was cents. Like honestly, we probably lost money because this place was a little ways from our house. And so I was driving back and forth a lot. And I bet that it was a significant gas cost plus mileage in my car, but we had a ton of lessons learned. And so after that one, we bought the next one, we flipped that, we made a little bit more money. I was able to take some of those profits and roll it into my first couple of rental properties. I bought a duplex as well as a triplex, and then some single families as well. Started building a little bit of a portfolio. This was all going through like late 2018, 2019, and we started to get some momentum going. And then getting into the end of 2019, 2020, I decided that I wanted to go faster. The people I'd been partnering with, they wanted to kind of keep doing, 3 to 5 houses a year sort of thing. I wanted to really start trying to figure out how to make some real money. And so I approached my best friend from college, Dan Austin, who's now my podcast host. He's still my business partner, and convinced him to go into business with me. And we were going to do these things together. We were going to figure out how to buy more houses and make more money. And so first thing we did is we joined a mastermind that's not dissimilar from the scale community that I run. It was a different group that was also focused on building a direct to seller marketing company, or like a real estate company. And we started sending out mailers to all these people in our market and trying to find deals. I mean, of course, it's harder than it looks when you look it up online or you hear about it on podcasts, especially when COVID sort of like happens halfway through your launch process. So we originally started marketing in January of 2020. COVID obviously happened in March. A lot of you guys will know that. And then from there, that kind of put a hiccup in things. So we just doubled down. And honestly, when a lot of our competition left the market, we decided to push harder and try to figure it out. And it took us about 5.5 months to get our first deal. And, we were about $30,000 in the hole in our marketing spend when we got it. And when we got that deal signed around, our original plan was like flip these properties or to keep them, but we didn't have any money. And so we wholesaled the deal. We assigned the contract for a fee, and we made $3,500. And that was our first like little paycheck that we got. And I'll always remember when I took the phone call and we got the deal assigned. Like we were literally out in the yard of another property that we were both walking, and like we like jumped and like high-fived in the yard, like just like such stupid corny thing. But I always remember that because that was our first big win, that like we learned that we could make money. And so we made $700 in that one. That was in like May of 2020. In June of 2020, we closed a couple more deals. So we got like a $13,000 fee and like a $10,000 fee. And then in August, we got our first big deal, which was like a $28,000 fee. And that's when I knew that we were starting to figure it out. And then ultimately in September, we were pulling a goose egg, and I went to, basically we had no deal sign around. I went to this meetup, this like in-person meetup for the community that I was in. And we were doing this like big coaching session. We were looking over our leads and everything like that. And, the guy that ran the group was basically like, hey man, like, I think you suck at like working these leads at like the sales process, which made sense because I didn't come from a sales background. I came from an engineering background, right? It's like, I think you need to find someone else to do this piece for you. And so what we did is we went and we hired a salesperson. I'd never hired anyone before in my life. I didn't even know how to do that. We didn't even have enough money to pay this person, honestly, for the first month. We had like $3,000 in the bank account. And all we knew was that we needed somebody that was going to come in and get us an immediate return, or else we were going to have a really awkward conversation at the end of the month. And so we plugged this person into our system, and they snagged 7 deals in the first 2 weeks they were with us. And in October of 2020, we had our first 6-figure month because of that. And I'll always remember, that month rounding out, because we had a ton of deals that were closing at the end of October. And it was my 30th birthday at the end of October. And we were at like a little cabin that we had rented to hang out with my parents for my 30th birthday, and during COVID. So we're kind of out in the middle of nowhere because you weren't supposed to meet anybody back then. And I literally remember sitting there and watching all these wires come into our account, and we made, I think it was $108,000 the month of October. And I was like, this is it. Like my entire life is going to look different because I just learned how to do this. Finished out 2020 really, really strong. Personally made about 160 grand. I think net like was my take home pay at the end of the month. And then going into 2021, we just doubled down and we really reinvested in the business and learned how to do it more consistently. Our business process is figured out, combined with an incredibly hot real estate market in 2021. Like honestly, that was my luck. That was my sort of like, I guess like really good fortune, I guess, for being in the game, was I was able to capitalize on how crazy that market was. And we made several $1 million in a very short period of time just by doing the thing that we had learned how to do the year before. You know, we built out a really basic sales team. We had one sales guy. We had a virtual assistant that would help work some of the calls. Then it was me and Dan just hustling. And we ended 2021 with a few $1 million in the bank. And you know, when we had acquired a few dozen properties at that period of time. So we were just reinvesting everything back into buying properties for our portfolio. And then that was sort of where everything started to, I would say, evolve into being like a proper real estate entrepreneur because we had made that first lump of money. And so a ton of stuff has happened between now and then, obviously. If you fast forward to now, I run a national real estate wholesaling and investing company that is active currently in about 10 markets. I have a sales team that works all virtually. I still live in my the same town up in Washington State, and we do properties. We do deals everywhere from here to all around the Southeast, the Midwest, everywhere, all sight unseen. And what we do is we source off-market deals and we sell them. I've slowed down on accumulating portfolio properties, mostly just because of the way interest rates and stuff are, but I still have a good number of the ones that I bought in 2021, which give me the ability to have financial freedom. This year we should do about $4 million top line. You know, we've also built out the Collecting Keys podcast, as you can see behind me, as well as our Scale community and a few other companies as well. So the main lesson, I guess, with all this, and one of the things that I really like to, I would say, like, encourage people to do is don't be afraid to take the leap, right? And have undying belief in yourself that you're going to be successful. Like so many people that I know, they have aspirations to do something big, and they always think that they need to have like, you know, a business that's established, or, you know, passive income from rental properties or from stocks or from something that's going to cover their current salary, right? Which really isn't realistic, honestly. It's going to take a super long time to build that up if you're doing it kind of like part-time, right? And instead, what you should do if you're able to do it is focus on learning to live super, super lean, right? Like keep your expenses low as possible. Learn to bank as much money as you possibly can so that you have a massive reserve, right? Make sure that your partner, family, whatever's on board, and then take the leap and spend every waking second that you can trying to figure out what you're going to do next, right? Or trying to figure out how to make your idea work. And if you're willing to do that, I guarantee you that your path to financial freedom and to wealth and whatever your idea of success looks like literally can go from taking a decade, taking like a year, right? Or like honestly, even longer than a decade, taking like decades, taking 15, 20 years to being done in a year. And it's not easy. Like it sucks, right? You have to go through a lot of BS to get to it. But if that is honestly the secret to being able to do something like leave Boeing or, you know, leave a golden handcuffs type career and be able to figure out how to live a lifestyle for yourself. Okay. You know, and now like I work a lot, but I have, since I started my business, and I started making some money, like I have lived an entire other lifetime in my 30s. Like so many people talk about how life kind of slows down in your 30s, but I've traveled to just about every continent in the world. I've been able to manage my business completely remotely. I've made incredible connections with some of the biggest names in real estate and everything else, right? And I've built out something that is going to have an incredible amount of income and wealth generation over the course of my life. And I did that all because I was willing to take the leap and do the hard things and figure it out. I know people don't like the sort of pull your bootstraps up sort of stories and figure it out, but honestly, that is what it takes. And never a guarantee. There's always a risk, but just remember that the quote unquote risk of doing something like that is to just go back to the job that you had before. Like fallback plan will be the same thing as what you were already planning to do anyway. So who cares, honestly? that's kind of how I got out of my career and what I do now. If that was helpful to you, be cool. Share this with your friends. That's a great way to help me continue to grow. Also, check out my podcast, the Collecting Keys podcast, anywhere that you listen to your shows. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, and you can also follow me on Instagram, Mike_invest. So, appreciate you guys listening. There's kind of my origin story for you, and I'll keep these coming. Thanks, everybody.